I thought I was going to be on a true crime podcast, so I was here ready to solve mysteries, and I feel like I missed my calling. Unless we're doing marketing crimes, and then combine the two.
We could probably have a whole...
And I've changed your whole podcast now.
You have, yeah. We're going to have a whole episode dedicated to marketing crimes.
It's a spin-off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Marketing Team of One podcast, where we have conversations about the issues one-person marketing teams face when trying to meet their goals with limited time and budgets.
Today on the podcast, I wanted to invite a guest in to talk about some real-world examples of like problems and like you doing it all yourself. It can be tough. There's a lot of things. So this is Erika Fatula. She is tell everybody what's your title, what's your day to day look like, what do you do there at River City Food Bank?
Hopes and dreams.
Yeah.
So I am the director of development and marketing at River City Food Bank. This is going on my 5th year, which is pretty incredible. In a couple of weeks, I'll be celebrating my anniversary, and so I handle all the fundraising and all the marketing. And if you're not familiar with River City Food Bank, it's a local nonprofit in Sacramento. And we have 2 locations, one in Midtown and one in Arden. Mm-hmm. And our whole mission is to alleviate hunger in Sacramento County by providing healthy, meaningful food to anyone. So it's a very welcoming space. And it's been around for 56 years. So
it's amazing. We've done a lot of work. I've done some volunteering and been really involved with my family and everything. And to see it over the years too, like, the mission hasn't been easy, right? Like food insecurity is a huge growing. It's
been insane. And I would say even just 56 years is a long time, but it's really been the most growth over the last 5 years. So since when I started in 2019, right before the pandemic, we were serving an average of 11 to 12,000 people per month. Yeah. Which is a lot because we have a really small staff. Then it was only about 9 people. Now it's more, I think, 16. So still really small. Yep. And grassroots. And I think the last month we did 33,000. So it's just been astronomical. Yeah. And there's a bunch of different reasons for the growth. You know, we thought when the pandemic hit and we went and saw that big leap up to like 20,000, we're like, well, it can't get worse than this, right? This has to be it. And then there was, stimulus checks, and there was emergency CalFresh allotments, and all different like emergency aids for people, because all of a sudden hunger was this big thing that people were paying attention to. It's always been there, it still is, but all of a sudden it was like, oh, this could be me too. Yep. People were getting fired, and there's a lot of financial ramifications. And it got a little bit better right after because there was a lot of funding allocated to it. And all of a sudden it was like, pandemic's over, emergency's done. Yeah. And we're like, oh, no, wait, it's not. So it's just continued to get worse because of inflation. So
you've got all these other factors that are right. You've got COVID funding, COVID programs have dried up completely, right? Yeah. Yep. And you've got increased demand. You've got so many more families that need food and and inflation. Yeah. I mean,
it's like the perfect storm.
It's right. Yeah. So, gosh, I mean, at you in your position, you have to help bring that all together, right? And be able to help. I mean, so it's a lot to do, right?
Like to try and
right. So in your day to day, you're in charge of fundraising. You're overseeing all of the marketing. I mean, do you have how do you divide up your time, and are they really closely aligned? Yeah. Or are there a lot of times where you see yourself like, all right, I'm putting on my fundraising hat, and then here I'm putting on my marketing hat?
That's exactly. I mean, there are times where they intersect, and I think it's helpful that I do both. In my day-to-day, I kind of have to balance my time between the two. And I started out as a team of one. Yep. And now I do have 2 full-time staff members, and one helps me with fundraising, and one helps with with marketing, and they're incredible. It's a lot of guiding and reviewing and being a creative director, and then turning around and, okay, we have a grant that's due. So I'm using one side of my brain, and then I'm using the other side. And I think that's awesome. And it helps keep me grounded, and I like the challenge of doing both, but it can be overwhelming because it really is two separate things in two separate departments. And, you know, I've worked at large nonprofits where they have a fundraising department and a marketing department. And what I like about it being one and the same where we are in our small nonprofit is that you are more cohesive in what you put out, because you know, in those larger nonprofits, what I found, and that might be my own personal experience, but they're very separate. The development's like the redheaded stepchild of the organization. No one really quite knows what's going on over there, but they know money's happening. And then marketing's more of the whole organization, and they don't always talk to each other, you know? So you're putting materials out there without these departments' input. And so I think you can tell when that's the case. Totally. Whereas me, when I started, I was, you know, fundraising, but out of necessity, I learned marketing. Yeah. There was no marketing person, let alone a marketing department. I was like, okay, well, let's do this. Let's figure it out. And we've built that up over the past 5 years. Yep. But I think being able to say, okay, this material serves the whole organization, and this serves fundraising. But how can we keep it cohesive and make it look like we talk to each other? So I think that's helpful and challenging.
How do you, that's a really unique problem, because like when you're doing it all yourself, it's really easy to keep that cohesiveness, right? You've got that, you know how you would say this thing, and you know who you're saying it to, and you know what the purpose is. But when you start that kind of like, you're in this like incremental like growth thing where now, like you said, you've got somebody in fundraising, somebody to help you in marketing. Do you have tricks that you, or like little guidance that, how do you promote that consistency across those two?
That's a good question. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it takes time. You know, it takes a lot of time to get into a groove with their styles, communication styles, and I had to learn a lot about. I was used to doing everything myself, so it's like it's easier to be like, I'll just do it. Yep. I'll just let me just do it because it's easier, because I don't know how to explain what I want it to look like, or you know. So I've had to learn, okay, I'll create a mock-up if I don't know. And then that guides them. At least they're not wasting their time. Yep. We communicate a lot, especially with marketing, about this is the idea, but don't take offense when I completely change this, you know. Yeah. But I also, because I'm the one that did it before, I know how much time goes into it. So I can be thoughtful in my ask. And because sometimes if you have someone that's in charge that has never created a campaign or anything, and they'll be like, these crazy unrealistic goals and expectations, and I at least know that I could step in, and I know how long things take, so I feel like I can provide guidance. But when it comes to like the voice and consistency, I'm still the one that's going to be at the finish line. I'm going to look at it, make sure, does this fit? And it just, after working together for a few years, you just know. Just like with my boss, I know there's certain things that she wants me to say in a certain way. And eventually it just becomes second nature. Yeah. How you say it.
Yeah. It's, sounds like you've we like to call them the brand cops, but you've kind of become the brand cop at the food bank, right? Like, there's a lot of nonprofits out there, right? And like trying to set yourself apart. And I know here in Sacramento, there is a lot of confusion between, River City Food Bank and Sacramento Food Bank. And what you do is different, but like, so it is really important to be able to be consistent but also differentiate. How do you have any things that you've done over the time to kind of try and stand out from a lot of, it can be a little noisy in the nonprofit space, right? Like you're competing against a bunch of people.
It is definitely difficult to be unique, and you are, but it's how to display that in the best way. Yeah. And what I found is really helpful is storytelling. So I think we've built that into our brand so effortlessly, because it's just a part of what River City Food Bank is and does in the community. And we've become so we call the people we serve guests. Yep. We're so guest focused, and not everyone knows what a food bank does, and we're a little different. We're unique in how we serve. And so the best way to do that is to show people, bring the food bank to them. Mm-hmm. So we try to incorporate as much storytelling into everything we do consistently across all platforms. It could be social media, our printed appeals, things that we say just in speaking presentations. Yeah. And not only storytelling, but being completely transparent and authentic. Yeah. These are real stories. These are real people. Yeah. And we're humbled because that's someone's life. We're seeing them in the most vulnerable and difficult times where it's not easy to ask for help. Yep. So that's one of the challenges of storytelling. Mm-hmm. But I think that is what makes us unique, is that we can show you this diverse population that we serve. And these are real people, because it's one thing to say, we served 300,000 people last year, and that's great, and that's impactful, and it's true. But it's another thing to say, here's Sarah. She's a single mom of 3 kids. She's here today because she's been skipping dinner, because even though she has 2 jobs, it's still not enough. Yep. And so this is her story. And the hope is that, there's a few things, because one of the other challenges is just having a bunch of different populations and audiences that you're putting your message out to.
I mean, so that was actually one of the questions I wanted to talk about is that I could think of at least 3 different audiences of people that you're trying to reach and everything. You've got your guests, right? And focusing on them, do you find that that some of your marketing is to let people know that you exist to help them? Do you is that a big percentage of the time that you have the marketing that you're trying to do, is let people know that they can get healthy meals and they don't have to choose between food and rent at this point? Is that a big part of it?
It is, and that's the marketing side, because that's not the fundraising side. Yep. So it's thinking, okay, when you're creating something, is who's my audience and does this serve them? Yeah. And when you have this diverse population of guests that you're serving, you have to have translated materials. Yeah. We serve a huge number of refugees, especially at our Arden site. So, is this in all the languages we need it to be in? I mean, just to unpack that, I mean, you've got there's probably 5 or 6 different languages commonly spoken across the 2 different ones, right? So it's probably closer to 20, they said.
Whoa,
but
really?
Consistently, there's I think the majority is like a Farsi, Dari, Pashto, Ukrainian, Russian, Spanish.
Yeah.
And
it's
Chinese. Everyone tells it,
Yeah. And so you've got to have a consistent message and have it translated to numerous different languages.
Yeah, and messages can be changed because it's not the same across.
Because I'm guessing what draws people in from one demographic might not be exactly some of the other little storytelling things might. Have you found any challenges with what they actually respond to in that messaging?
Well, so there's a couple of different things. With the storytelling aspect, the hope is that someone will see themselves in a story. Yeah. Because we want them to see, here's a senior, they also had a retirement plan and worked their whole lives, but here they are in line at the food bank, and maybe I can go there too because they're just like me. And so the hope is that you'll see it's a safe space. People are here just like you. It's not exactly what you would think it is, that people that need the food bank, you could imagine, they're getting cans, and everyone is unsheltered or homeless, and it's not. That's like 15% of who we serve, and the rest are working families and seniors. And so by storytelling for our guests, we're hopeful that they'll see that it's okay, that there's no stigma in getting help, and that it's a safe space to be. Yep. And when we're creating materials for people, we have to think more on, is this accessible to people? So do we need to have a video where we say it all, because someone might not be able to read this? Or, do we make sure we're not using jargon words? So sometimes it's storytelling and sometimes it's accessibility. Yeah. And I think you need all that combined.
Accessibility is such a huge how do you get the feedback, or do you solicit feedback do you have representatives for different areas to kind of bounce some of this stuff off of? when it comes to that?
I think some of our biggest ambassadors are our volunteers. They're the ones on the front lines with our staff that are hearing all the feedback. And we have staff and volunteers that speak a variety of languages, so it's helpful to kind of check in is it the best food that we're giving them, because we want to give them meaningful food. So we check in about that. And then also when our team is going out and getting stories, we're getting that feedback sometimes too.
Yep.
And I think you'll find even in marketing, you can make the best material, you can put everything out there, and there's still going to be confusions or people that don't see it, or you can't possibly hit all of the challenges.
How much easier would it be if we could, right?
And because of budget constraints, there's only so much we can do with accessibility.
Oh, totally.
We can't have a bunch of software or things like that. So we're trying to do what we can with the limited means that we have.
Yeah. So one thing that I've found really interesting, and I was hoping you could talk a little bit about, is one of your initiatives that In the Line.
Yeah.
And could you talk a little bit about what In the Line is and how it came about and what how that's been received?
Sure. And we actually are putting one out today.
Awesome.
So In the Line is part of our storytelling efforts. So it's challenging to get stories in general because people, like I said, it's a really hard time. They're in line, they're hungry, they're outside, so they're probably hot or cold or whatever. So it's always a challenge to say, hey, I know this is a bad time, but can I hear your life story?
Yeah.
So we always just try and build relationships, and part of that is we have these polished stories. They're always real and authentic, but sometimes it's a campaign, and it's a little more like, here's Mike, and he's at the food bank for this reason, and it's hopeful, but it's a little more polished in its presentation.
Yeah.
And the line is not.
Yeah.
It is meant to be more raw, because what we came across is we're seeing people interviewing after they get food. This is while they're in the line to get food, and it's not really like what's your whole life story. It's like, where are you at right now?
Yeah.
How is life? Because I think it's important to understand our community and the situations that bring them to the food bank.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges we also found was a lot of people don't want their face on camera, or they, for a variety of reasons. And sometimes it's because they feel some shame. They don't want their neighbors or family knowing that they're there.
Yep.
And other times, because we serve so many refugees, it's literally because their life is in danger.
Yeah.
Or it's a domestic violence situation, also life is in danger. So we're like, but they have these amazing stories. And how can we put their truth out there while also keeping them safe and confidential?
Yep.
And that's where In the Line came in. We're still kind of working out the kinks, but it's just meant to be raw, short clips of people without, and they usually share their name, and we tell them they don't have to, but the idea is that if we don't have their face on things, maybe people would feel more comfortable talking about their story without feeling some of that.
I've thought that it's such when we talked about it before, I thought it was such a creative idea and how you kind of worked around some of those common problems, specifically around security and confidentiality, but still have a good way of telling that story. I thought that was really kind of it was a good way of creative thinking around the problem, right? And which is so key, right? There's so much of, you've got limited time, limited budgets, right? So you got to think about some of those kind of different ways to get stuff out there.
And it's still hard because what happens is we'll go to interview someone and they want so badly to be like, we love River City Food Bank, and it makes us so happy to hear that. But we're like, no, you don't have to say that. We just want to hear about you and your. So sometimes, in trying to get that raw story that we hear when we're not recording, it is sometimes more difficult to capture it when people know that we are.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh well, we want to tell people how much we appreciate you, and we're like, no, this is just about you. So, so we're learning the right questions to ask and how to ask it and when to ask it. And when it's 106 degrees today, it's probably not the right time to ask it. Yeah. So we're learning a lot of things.
So I'm just curious, within the line, and you've trying to get people to open up and tell their story. you've removed some barriers by making it more confidential and kind of there's more security in that. Do you find that it's easier to get people to tell your story because of there's less objections?
Yeah, I think it has been helpful. It's still working on building that trust because some people are coming once and never again. Some people come every week. So I think it helps to know and build a relationship with them. So oftentimes it's our guests who are unsheltered who feel the most comfortable sharing their stories. And then we have to work on the families and the seniors, and because even though their face isn't being shown, it's still hard to be vulnerable. And especially for our refugees, because there is a language barrier. So I'll try and ask one of our volunteers or staff members that speaks our language. But they've gone through so much trauma. And even though they trust us as a food bank, they don't know me. They don't know my team. So sometimes it takes a bit of working with them and talking with them. And so I think that's still kind of the struggle, because for our refugees that we have, I don't know if you're familiar with Arden is like #1 in the whole nation for resettled Afghan refugees. And when the Taliban took over and people escaped, I mean, there's people that here that if their names or faces were out there, like their family's still back there. So it is, to them, it's not even worth the risk. Like, what if someone hears my voice? Or, sometimes it's not even anonymous enough. We can say that we're not going to use their face, but if they don't necessarily know you, it might be hard to trust given all the things that they've been through. So we're working on building that with people, and it takes a bit of time to get their stories.
I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit, because I mean, fundraising is a huge thing, right? That's one of the big engines that drives the food.
Apparently,
bank, right?
You need money.
Evidently,
to do stuff.
Right?
I know, it's crazy.
And so when we think about marketing and things you can do to it drives me to one of the other key audiences that I think you have to talk to, and that's donors, right? Like there's grants as well, but I think like talking specifically to donors and like how the storytelling helps with that, right? Like because they see immediately who they're making an impact, who their money's going to, and everything like that. But what other things have you found, like in trying to wearing that marketing hat and the fundraising hat a little bit, that
it's too many hats.
Thing. Too many hats.
Oh my gosh.
But like what have you found when trying to be creative and reach that market with your or that audience, I should say?
Yeah, storytelling also, like you said, plays a big part in that, and it's the stakeholders and the grant funders, and it's like I said before, those big numbers, they want those, but it's really about the impact you're making on specific people. So I think that is super helpful, but it's not. We can't lean and we can't rely completely on that. So it's this combination of. It's this balancing act all the time. There's a story, and here's a statistic, and here's some recognition, and I think it's very individualized, and I think that's what fundraising is, in that you're customizing every experience to the person.
Interesting.
It's difficult to do that. But you really have to put a lot of effort into you're not casting a wide net, but you're being very strategic. Because I'm not a car salesman. I don't want to sell you on what we do. I want to connect what we do with people who are passionate about helping people. And I think, if I had to say the biggest part of what makes marketing successful and fundraising is emotional intelligence. And it's being able to connect and empathize with whomever the audience is, whether that's supporters or guests, is meeting people where they're at, whether that's a business professional or someone in our line. And it takes a lot of time and effort. And so often I would say I focus more, at least nowadays, on quality over quantity in everything I do.
Right. Especially now with like the rise of AI tools and everything, I think you could everyone's going to try a quantity game, right? Like it's not too hard to do that, right? But like nothing's going to stand out in that thing. So I think focusing on the quality is really good.
Yeah.
I think, do you find that I'm sure there's some like tools in your belt, right, that you can use consistently across them, right? Like even if you're being kind of empathetic and meeting people where they're at, there's certain things like I'm assuming like your mission's probably driving everything, right? Like,
absolutely.
Like that's one of the key things in your belt, right? And then you've got really compelling numbers. Like I was looking through your impact report, right? And everything that how many people you're serving, how many pounds of food you're delivering to directly to people. Those are all great things in there. But so what you're kind of doing when meeting with, say, what was the word you used? I loved it. It was a supporter, right? Like you're like anyone who's supporting, right? Each one's going to have their own needs, and you're meeting them where they're at, but you can kind of mix and match some of those tools and have like a high quality conversation with them, right? So it's not like you've got this deck
boilerplate.
that you're just like, here we do this and we do this and we do this, right? That would be
and
it wouldn't work, right?
Part of that is the meeting with people and getting to know them and what their passion is, because it might be that they grew up and they were homeless or needed food, and that's what drives them. Or it might be a tax reason. It might be that it's a corporation and that's one of their guiding principles is basic needs. So it's being thoughtful and taking the time to learn what drives people's motivation to give.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to do that when you're doing like a printed appeal or something like that, because it's going out to a large group of people. But what you can do, again, quality over quantity, is you're not bombarding people with just whatever you can put out that month. Because I've been at nonprofits where they had these like huge direct mail programs, and it must be some kind of ROI or they wouldn't do it. But it's casting this wide net, and I feel like that's just not what I want to do. I do 3 printed appeals, and that feels like a lot to me sometimes.
Totally.
But I want to put something together that it means something, or it's just a waste of our resources and your time. And really then we're not being good stewards of your money, because we're wasting it on printing things and sending it.
Totally.
So it's part of it is also is being strategic in who you're sending what to. Yeah. So if I know that you only give online and that's how you prefer to give, I'm not going to send you a printed appeal.
Yeah.
That's a waste of your time.
Definitely.
But also there's so, like you said, hundreds, if not thousands, of nonprofits in Sacramento. People are being inundated with causes.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to get donor fatigue. You don't want to just put content out to put it out and just to be relevant. So I think that's what I've found is when I first started doing fundraising and marketing, this need to be like, okay, I got to put stuff out. I have to come up with this content. And now I'm like, do we need this?
Yeah.
Does this fit a need, our mission? Does this serve a purpose for our guests? Does this fulfill our core values? And if it doesn't, let's not waste our time doing it, because our time is valuable.
That's such a good filter to, because it'd be really easy to get focused on the wrong thing and spend a lot of time. And like you said, like money too, on something that's not going to get, the return on investment is not going to be very high at all. Yeah, no, I think that's an amazing.
Yeah. We got to buy food, and so that's what we saw this need, and we're like, okay, what can we? It's this balancing act of you got to be creative, but you can't spend money.
Yeah,
and you got to get money in, but again, you can't spend money, and so you're trying to be always being consistent, but being unique. Yeah, and it's like how. And I don't always get it right, but
it's always testing new things, figuring out what kind of works. Oh, that looked good. Let's see if we can.
And if it fits your mission and your values, then even if it didn't work out, at least I feel like good about it.
It's like you didn't take a big swing that's outside your comfort zone. Then you probably feel like you need to take a long cold shower or something just to wash it all off or something, right? Like
I was transparent, and I was a good, I believe fully in being transparent with donors and in challenges and in things that come up every year, because God, they do. weird expenses or emergencies that happen. And I think it's just always about being upfront and honest with whomever it is, whether it's a in-kind or a monetary donor or just a hunger advocate that's out there raising awareness for what you do.
Yeah.
So I think that as long as I get at the end of the day, even if a campaign flopped, if I felt good about what it looked like and how it represented the food bank, then I'm good with that.
That's good. Just
for example, in February, we did a little Valentine's Day campaign, and I didn't want to spend money, nor do I have the budget to do something new. So it was all digital. The only thing it costs is my time. And it was adorable, I might say. Like, it was super cute little Valentine's Day cards. And I felt good about it, but it didn't really bring any money in, but it also didn't cost anything. So that's one thing. And then recently we just did a summer hunger, like a e-appeal. Again, doesn't cost any money, but there are a lot of people who struggle, especially families in the summer months. And we used to, way back in the day before the pandemic, did a printed summer appeal. But I've had to move that because our Empty Bowls event that we have used to be in the spring. Now it's at the end, and I don't want to stack people up with asks month after month. So I really try to focus on what can we do digitally and try out. And then if it feels like it's a good fit, then we can maybe work that into the budget the following year. So it's just, again, it's a balancing act, and I think I just have to trust myself. I've been doing it for a long time, so I can kind of gauge when I think something's going to be worth it. And I think testing it out when it's not going to cost you, and it's more of a kind of a digital test, that helps.
I think it's really, though, you're not taking like huge, big, like moonshot ideas, right? Like, you're like, let's test small, let's do, avoid printing costs and postage costs and stuff like that. Try out the little things. I think that's a good idea. Like, just digitally, and a digital test ground.
And then asking a bunch of people. Like, I'll try and have as much people as I can read it. And like, how does it resonate with you? Is this too long? Because I'm very wordy. So just having different people look at it and see if it's impactful. And honestly, I'm the one that came up with the deadline. So if it doesn't work out and we don't do it, but then we don't do it. And I would rather put something out there that I was proud of. And if I think it's not going to be completely like a good representation of us, I'd rather just pull it completely.
One thing I was curious about is with your marketing efforts and especially when you talk about supporters, do you find that you get some surprise, like big supporters out of those efforts, or do you find that your most of it's more targeted, like that balancing act? I mean, it would be great if you had a whole bunch of big ones coming out of the woodwork.
That would be great.
Do you find that at all, or do you have to be more selective? In the market, there's that idea of like an account-based marketing strategy where you've got a target and everything you're doing is very tuned to that target. And we talked a little bit about like how you target the message to the people you're talking to, and just expanding it to a marketing side. But I'm just curious, do you have, is your efforts, or are they more pointed towards that kind of really tailored approach, or do you get some surprises out of?
Oh, we have surprises every year. So it's funny. We always call them anomalies because we know that we can never count on the same gift every year, but we know that something random will happen. And I think we do have a really amazing, dedicated, loyal donor base. And so there are certain people that I know will always be forever supporters. And then there's other ones like grant funders who it's never guaranteed. You can get funded every year for 5 years, and all of a sudden they're like, we changed our guidelines, and all of a sudden they're not a funder anymore. So it is
interesting.
You can't ever. Every year I'm like, hope people give. Hope we get money in, because it's never guaranteed. Especially in inflation right now, our donors are also getting hit with these extra costs. Some of our donors have often been guests, and and corporations are seeing more applications for funding, and they have smaller budgets. So it's like, okay, our expenses have went up. Fundraising's harder. And you're just constantly going, okay, now what can we do? Now what can we do? And I think it's just being strategic about it and knowing that there are going to be anomalies, but you should never put them out of your head. That money doesn't exist.
It's a very nice to have.
Yeah.
but yeah, nothing.
You pretend it's not going to happen because it might not. It's never guaranteed. And I think with marketing and then just stewardship in general with your donors is you're putting seeds out there, and I'll put things out into the world. I go, well, I hope they liked it. I hope that worked. And you don't always know if that big check that came in was because of something you put out. But I think it is, even if it's not directly tied to a campaign. I think when you're working hard and you are building a brand that people trust and you're being transparent and authentic and you're putting stuff out year over year and people see that and give to you, it might not have been that appeal that you sent out.
Could have been one you did like 2 years ago, right? And it just kind of, like you said, planted that seed and it's slowly grown.
And sometimes that is with fundraisers. You're just like, hope it's working.
Yeah.
And that's, and so far it is, but it's definitely a struggle.
So I wanted to, I think I'm guessing that you're probably right in the middle of one of your big kind of like, at this point in time, you're in the middle of your biggest campaign of the year.
This is the crying couch, eh?
Yeah, it is. I wanted to, so like, one, I was hoping you could tell people about Empty Bowls.
Sure.
Tell them exactly what it's about. And, but then I would love to peel back and like hear, because I'm assuming there's some big challenges that you've got right now in trying to promote it.
You would assume, right? Yeah, so Empty Bowls is our one and only fundraiser of the year, and it has changed a lot. This is the 21st year, and in case you're wondering, sponsorships and tickets are available. It's on September 19th at the Sacramento Zoo, which is awesome, and it's really changed over the years because of COVID. So this is the 21st year and my 5th year, but I've never actually been to an original Empty Bowls because when it was a lot bigger and it was in the convention center, and it had like a big committee, and then our 2020 date was March 17th. 2020. Yeah. So I don't know if you're familiar with that. A little something happened that week, and everything.
St. Patrick's Day, right?
Exactly. It was St. Patrick's Day. I'm so impressed with you. So that was when everything shut down, and all of a sudden we were prepared to have this event, which brings in, at that point it was a third of our budget. Yeah. Now it's a little more diverse, but we didn't know what to do, and we had to move our entire event virtual. Yeah. In months. Yeah. And so we did that for a couple of years. We did it virtual, and we had amazing sponsors and supporters. And then we knew when we went back in person in 2022 that we couldn't go back inside because we weren't sure if there was going to be a resurgence, and we wanted to keep people safe. And we didn't have the same kind of committee or staff support. So again, work smarter, not harder. Yep. How can we raise more money with less people coming, which is its own challenge, and still have more sponsorships and all that fun stuff. So we have to raise, I think it's $400,000 for our event, and every single dollar goes to our program expenses. So it's so important to have unrestricted funding, which is what that is. And so we have all this food that we're purchasing because of the need that we're seeing. We have emergencies that come up, and what the unrestricted funding does is it helps us plug those holes wherever they might be. Yep. And it's so critical. And we only have one event because we don't have an events team. It's me, it's my team. It's a couple of us doing this huge gala essentially. So now we went through from having 1,200 people come to 350 people come, and now it's outside at the zoo, which is a lot of fun. But we've had to have the challenges of how do we promote sponsors when we weren't having an in-person event and it was just virtual, and how do we maintain that now that we're in person, but we have a fraction of the people that used to come, so there's not as many ticket sales, and it's a lot to and there's a lot of marketing involved in that too, all the materials, the promotion. Ooh, don't remind me. And we're in the thick of it.
I think I've been to the last 3 events, and it's so unique. It's so charming. I think that, and I'm always impressed with what you've done to put it together. And it seems like an overwhelming success for given all those pivots you've had to make over the time. Do you feel that way still, that you like, are you able to pat yourself on the back and kind of?
I think anyone that knows me knows I'm not good at that. I will be like, we hit the goal or surpassed it, but you didn't see this happen in the back end of this and this. They're like, Erika, it says, but you hit your goal.
Yeah.
But it could have been better. Yeah. So I think I'm always motivated to improve the experience because there's always room for improvement. But I do feel like we've done a great job to fundraise in a climate that's not always easy to fundraise in, with an amazing group of sponsors and supporters who have been with us, some of them for a full 21 years that we've been doing it. And we have these beautiful handmade bowls that, when I first started, I was like, why are people they love these bowls? And some are from amateur potters, some are professional potters. And then when I saw them, I'm like, I get it. I want these bowls. I want bowls every year. Yeah. And there's people that come for the bowls. And so these beautiful, and they're all different kinds and styles. And they're really just a representation of filling people's bowls, because there's so much hunger, and this is how we're making an impact. And so when you look at this bowl, know that you're helping someone in the community. So I just think it's so cool and unique. Yeah. And you get to be at the zoo, which is really cool. Yeah.
It's really, there's something really strange eating, 20 feet from the lemur cage, but it's so entertaining too, just to be able to kind of, I've never been to a event that seemed so unique, and I think it's fantastic.
I think when you're planning something and you're in it, it's hard to see if people enjoyed it, or it's so I appreciate hearing that. We work really hard to it's not easy, and we only do one event because it's so cumbersome to have events. When
much work,
nonprofits have like something every month or every quarter. I'm like, how do you do it? You need like a whole events team. So I think one's enough for me.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. So you're in the middle of promoting Empty Bowls. Do you find that selling tickets is the hardest thing, or is it getting the sponsorships? Like which one's bigger challenge when it comes, like you're in the thick of it now, right?
I'd say both. Or challenges for different reasons. Because we went down to such a smaller set, we have this very large sponsorship goal. And so tickets are tied to sponsorship. I have to make sure that we hit our sponsorship goal, and I can't start selling tickets until I know that that's covered, because if I oversell our 350 limit, then I would be in some trouble. Yeah. So it's trying to balance the two and knowing when the right time is that we're going to hit our sponsorship goal. So I think I'm finding it difficult last year and this year in fundraising, in that a lot of companies just don't have that extra income to put towards sponsorship. They want to support. And I'm also finding it difficult with ticket sales for the same reason. Yeah. We've had to increase the ticket price because everything has gotten more expensive, the food, the AV, the printing. And so we want to make sure that we still bring in the money, because we're relying on that for our budget to purchase food, healthy food for people. So we have to keep it there, but then a lot of folks just don't have the ability to do that. So we also send out a printed appeal to a larger group that we know aren't able to come to the event for a variety of reasons, and hope that they still might want to support us. And that goes to the event, the total fundraising that we do. So I think it's difficult, but I think every event's like that. You're trying to promote, there's so much going on, especially we're having it in September, and that tends to be a large quantity of events going on. Yeah,
and that's when it really picks up, right? Yeah. Kids go back to school, they know people are going to be home, and then
it goes back up again. So, and I think it's helpful because our event's on a Thursday. So for me as a parent, like that, I'd rather a Thursday event that you're in and out in a couple hours and instead of a whole weekend. Yeah. So we hope that it's quick, impactful, people have fun, and then they could go on with their week. But yeah, it's definitely, I think, difficult to just deal with the expenses that are also going up, and how to have the same level of event with the same quality, and you're asking people to pay this extra money. You want to make sure that it's a good experience and that they got what they paid for. Yeah. And that can be hard. I think harder even than getting sponsorships.
Do you, that's got to be everyone there knows the mission, right? Everyone who attends Empty Bowls, they know that mission.
No. You know why? Because you have sponsorships. So a lot of times companies are bringing...
They buy a table.
They buy a table, and then they're bringing, which is amazing because we want to have new people learn about the food bank. But that's why our video is so important.
Yes.
In our program, because we have to bring the food bank to you, and even people who might support us. Our food bank has changed so much since COVID that even people who had been around volunteering pre-COVID might not necessarily see it the same because it's changed out of necessity. So it's cool to each year kind of show people who we are and what we do, because a lot of our guests have never heard of us before.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I sorry, that was a big assumption. I was jumping to a big assumption that everybody knows the mission, but
we also, with sponsorships, a lot, they're not always companies. We have a lot of our individual large donors who provide sponsorships. They get the tables, they support that way. So they've been with us for decades.
Yeah.
So I'd say half the audience are people that are learning about us, and the other half are diehard supporters who go year after year.
Yeah.
It's a really cool mixture of people, and they're all there for the same reason. It seems like a fun event for a really amazing nonprofit, and they're there to support us.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a really good opportunity to tell our story in a way that's compelling for people who know us and also for people who don't.
Yeah. The video portion is so great. I mean, the last few examples you've had, I'm thinking of, I think it was 2 years ago, the story of was it the Russian refugee and how they found the food bank and got so involved that they then were able to volunteer and became so ingrained in that. Was so, I don't know how you could leave that event and not feel like, what else can I do? What more can I do to help?
It was an intense. And their daughter was adorable, and she had artwork there that she was really into painting, and she made this beautiful painting for us that we were auctioning off that night. And she came up to me and she's like, "What if no one likes it?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Everyone's gonna love it. They're gonna battle over this thing," and it did.
And they did.
And she just was so excited. That's a pretty amazing moment. Yeah, that was an amazing story of just resilience that I couldn't even comprehend of a family. So
it was very, I think it was very good. And I think, I would hope that anybody, all those people who are just learned so much, came away with that, with just such a really good idea of what you're all about and who you ultimately are helping, and that everything that was done there was in the service of those people.
Yeah. It's, again, the transparency of this is who we are, and we hope you like us. We hope you want to support us. If not, that's okay too. Thanks for coming and learning about us, and we appreciate that. And it's just a really good opportunity, because it's difficult when you make the video because you don't know exactly what to focus on to make it a little different. Because what we do is what we do. It's not. It's the same. We're given food. Here's the food. We do it, with compassion and dignity and respect. But how do you convey that in a meaningful way in 5 minutes so that people are like, yes, please take my money and support your organization. And so that in itself is a challenge. And especially after we had that incredible family that did their testimonial, we're like, well, how do we follow up with that?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And so last year we wanted to focus on how diverse our population is. So you see both sites, and although we serve the entirety of Sacramento, people go to these very specific sites that make this sense for them. So we see certain populations, and it looks so different even though we serve the same. And being able to give people in the audience a glimpse into what that looks like. Here's this beautiful fresh fruits and vegetables. It's not just cans. Yep. It's we have refugees. We make sure we have halal meats available. Yeah. We have our homeless folks that come. We have a table specifically for people who don't have access to a kitchen. So we want you to know that not only are we providing healthy food with your generous contributions, that it's meaningful. Food is so important beyond just fulfilling a basic need. It connects us, and so we're trying to show the audience how that can impact them. You may have never experienced hunger, but how can we show you how close that is to you, especially with seeing a senior. That could be your parent. We're seeing so many college students that are experiencing hunger.
Interesting.
There's a huge spike in it. And so I think when you bring that to an audience and you're like, oh, my kid's in college, or my parent is living in a different state, what could that be them?
Yeah.
And I think that's just a moment where you're not trying to feel like dread or doom. It's more like a sense of call to action of this is a big problem, but we can all do stuff. Here's this very specific people that we can make a difference in their lives. And I think that's such a important part and just difficult to wrap up in this 5-minute video.
Totally.
So that can be a challenge sometimes.
Do you feel pressure to kind of change up some of the, I wouldn't say messaging, but because the mission doesn't change. Do you feel pressure to kind of keep things fresh? Do you have any things you've done to try and put a fresh spin on?
You know, I think sometimes I try to, and then I end up going right back to it. I think it feels repetitive to me because I'm reading it over and over and over again.
You're so close to it, right?
Yeah, but in reality, people aren't seeing it as often as I am. They're not tracking every social media post and going, oh, see, she said that word again. You know, she's using that phrase again. So it's like, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Because what happens is you start straying, and I'll start playing around with how I say things. I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't really sound, that sounds like me.
Yeah.
But that doesn't sound like us.
Yeah.
And so I have to try and tamp that down sometimes of like, you can be creative and try new things, but don't try to sound so different that you move away from what makes your organization special.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you about is the, let's say, confusion and the partnership, but between you and River City Food Bank and Sacramento Food Bank, right? Because there's it's a complementary relationship, but you are unique, you are different. You're doing. Could you explain a little bit of the difference between there and maybe work you're doing to let people know what that difference is?
Sure. Yeah. So Sacramento Food Bank is an incredible partner. We could not operate without them. They are a Feeding America food bank, so a little bit larger. Every region has a Feeding America food bank. It's kind of, I would explain it being the wholesaler, so they have really a large warehouse. They have over 100 partner agencies that they work with, and they're the hub, and we're the spokes, the boots on the ground, direct service. So we're a bit smaller, and they help provide resources to us. So we do have to purchase a lot of the food we get, but they help with getting some of the product that we give out, especially our like non-perishable goods. But they also work with grocery store partners to help get some of those donations in, which is super helpful. So they're a great resource. And honestly, when we saw a huge spike in need during the pandemic, we wouldn't have been able to make it without them. So great partners, and we are different. And I think that what happens is people hear food bank and they kind of think we're all connected on the back end of, oh, you all share the same website or the same budget or the same board. We're completely separate.
Yeah.
So although, all the food banks, we share resources, we try to work together because hunger is such a big issue, especially in Sacramento, which is a huge region. We all do it very differently, and it can be a challenge sometimes to be like, support them, but also us. And
it's like we're all fighting for the same cause. Yeah. Like this is all like
you're rooting for each other.
You're not really competitors.
Yeah, exactly.
But there is this wanting to differentiate the message a little bit, especially if like you're doing I think it's fair to say you're doing a lot more direct service. You're like Sacramento Food Bank does do direct service, but not to the extent that you're doing 4 distributions a week, right?
They do a lot of the providing of food. Yep. So they have a huge warehouse, and they really help us get connected to food that we might not otherwise have access to, which is super important. And we're so much smaller. So it's just trying to educate, like, we hope you support both of us. Yeah. Because hunger is such a big pervasive issue. And it's the same with, we're not competitors. It's the same with any nonprofit. We're all applying for grants. I hope you get it too.
Yeah.
But I also hope I get it.
Yeah.
And it's just, so all you can do again is being authentic and saying, this is how we serve. This is the impact we make. And hope that resonates with people, and finding the people that does resonate with it, and just letting them know the difference. It doesn't mean like support us, not them. It's, could you support us both?
Yeah.
That would be great. Because in the end, it all supports the community.
Yep.
So I think what we've learned since the pandemic especially is that we really all have to collaborate in order to be successful.
Yeah.
And that sometimes is telling each other about grant opportunities with Site Food Bank and other nonprofits. Like, did you check this out? Are you experiencing this same problem in fundraising? Sometimes you think you're on an island alone. So just talking to other professionals in nonprofits, or I have pallets of this food and we can't use it. Can you use that?
Yeah.
So I think it's just really important for all nonprofits to collaborate, but it is hard in the marketing side of it to showcase how we're unique.
Yeah.
And we're still working on it. It's
probably
it's ever evolving.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's just kind of, you pick on, like we talked about the small tests, right? You have these little things that seem to be working, and then just kind of, hopefully it's a small snowball that's going to get bigger.
Yeah.
And everything. Yeah.
And then by the time you figure it out, something
else
changes.
will change. Yeah. Right.
Then you have a pandemic, or you have the next emergency, and we're like, okay, now it's time to change.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Wow. Okay. The podcast is meant to speak to people who are really trying to do it all themselves, and they're spinning a lot of plates and everything. And you for a long time, you were that person, right? Like, were there things that you learned over when doing it all yourself? Some like tips or tricks or little things that helped you survive, and got to a point now which I think is probably an undercurrent of all of our messaging, is it's really hard to do it all yourself.
It is, yeah.
And that sometimes you do need help. And I think you've got to a point where you have that help now. But before you had that help, what were some things that helped you? I'm using help a lot in this, but.
Help.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I had a really good answer for that. I think oftentimes I was just surviving. I mean, It was reactive. I didn't have time to think about it. I just did it. Now I have more time to be thoughtful about things. But in the moment, I was trying to pick tools that were going to make my life a little easier. Yeah. Because I fell into marketing. I started with fundraising, and out of necessity, I did marketing, but I had no clue what I was doing. So I was trying to find things that were going to make my life a little bit easier. Since I didn't have all the experience with all the fancy platforms and softwares, and then really trying to get other people's opinions on stuff, because I was growing in a new nonprofit as a marketing person that I'd never done this before, and so I'm always having people check my work. Does this make sense? Is this meaningful? And I can see, looking back, how much I've grown over that time, and then really having boundaries and not agreeing to do everything.
That's a hard thing to do.
It is
too,
really
right?
hard. I'm still struggling with that. But when your time is so precious, and if you're doing marketing and fundraiser, even if you're just doing marketing because it's its own heap of work, you really have to figure out if it's going to be worth your time. And then you have to speak up and advocate for yourself, because sometimes people are suggesting things. They don't know how much time and effort's going to go into it. They're not doing it maliciously. They just think it's a really cool idea. And you have to say, no, I'm sorry. And give reasons, to give the context. Here's all the reasons why this isn't going to work, and come up with some solutions of different things you could do.
One thing that comes up a lot in our conversations is this idea of managing up, I think. And I think you hit on something really important, like that sometimes some weird expectations can get set because of not knowing, right?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear you unpack that a little bit more about what, like, let's say, say that you're trying to let people know why either that's not a good idea, or why it might be a good idea, but the timing's not right. Like, are there some things that you've used when trying to set expectations? And
I think I'm really lucky that I have a board and executive director that trusts me and listens to me and says, we hired you as a professional in this, and we're going to trust that you have the best interest of the organization in mind. Now, at the beginning, you might necessarily haven't built that yet of like your reputation and delivering. So I think just providing context of like, okay, you want this done. Here's how much it's going to cost. Here's how much time it's going to take. If you want that, okay, great. We're going to have to take some other stuff off. We have to prioritize. And I think it's just having real conversations about whether or not it's worth the time. And if the person's still like, yes, then we need to do this. Okay, then that's what we'll focus on. But then some other things have to go off of the plate. And I think it goes down to that advocating for yourself and knowing that people are usually doing things with good intentions. And we don't always get to do the projects that we want to do. And sometimes you're going to have to do something that you might not necessarily think was the best option. But now 5 years later, now that I'm supervising 2 full-time people who are incredible, I'm always just trying to say, I hired you for a reason. I'm learning from you too. And I have the experience as far as the things that we've done here at the organization, but I might make choices, but then I want to go, and what do you think? Is this too much? Is it? And I want to, because I've learned from all the different experiences I've had where I didn't always feel like I had the voice to make that. And I want to make sure that my team does, but also I've done your job by myself. So I know how hard it can be. I know how long things take. And I have high expectations. But I also can step in and help when it's needed, which I think is helpful.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. I want to thank you for coming by and being a guest. I think it's been really insightful and thinking a lot about being intentional about what you take on and really just talking about a lot of the challenges that, especially if you're in this dual role of trying to market to serve the most people that you can, but also market to fund that need too. It's a challenge. For other people who are interested, they want to get involved, they want to become supporters, what options do they have to help?
Well, first I would say please visit rivercityfoodbank.org. We are always looking for volunteers. We have 4 distributions, 2 locations each week, and we could not operate without volunteers. So that's super important. And you can also see there's a little button on there for empty bowls if you're interested in attending. That'd be awesome. And you can always just contact me and I could give you a tour and you can learn more about the food bank. And if you ever need help, you are always welcome at River City Food Bank. There is no judgment and there is no barriers. So we hope that we can just teach you a little bit about what we do. Yeah.
So they can reach you on the website. Is your email available there?
Under staff, I'm under that. My email's there. And then also we have our little donate button up there. So every $2 provides 1 healthy meal. So if you feel like you don't have a ton of money to give, just know that it makes a huge impact because we have these partners and we're able to stretch every dollar. So
that's fantastic.
Every dollar counts.
Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in. For more information and other episodes, subscribe to the Marketing Team of One podcast on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify podcast networks. You can also chat with us on the r/Marketing Team of One subreddit or visit marketingteamofone.com to learn more.